Thank you, members of Synod. Will you give your attention to the moderator, please? Thank you.
Members of Synod, we welcome Rod Mummery back to speak to the ballot for the Synod Standing Committee, the majority ballot. We're not up to that? Okay. Okay. Would you like to describe the process for us then?
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Moderator Rod Mummery, Yarra Yarra, Wurundjeri Country Returning Officer. Because the deadline for the nomination, close the nominations to the Standing Committee was extended and the profiles are being prepared at the moment, they will be up very shortly. The vote for that will be tomorrow morning, I believe.
Thanks, moderator. Sorry, some notes in our running sheet didn't get deleted from a former version to the current version we're working with, so apologies for causing you to run too quickly then. Right. Thanks, moderator. Over to you.
So we'll have more tomorrow morning.
All right, in that case, we turn our attention now to proposal number 7, which is the Synod response to the Tasmanian End-of-Life Choices Voluntary Assisted Dying Act. With this topic under discussion, can I impress on you even more than usual the importance of making sure that this is a safe space for all. We're on this journey together and we need to be careful about confidentiality, including in our working groups, how we respect each other and our stories. The practice of respect and confidentiality will continue through this whole Synod meeting and will be part of having an atmosphere of trust here. This is a sensitive topic and it can affect any of us in various ways. If at any stage in plenary or in working groups, anyone feels that they need some space for reflection or to gather your thoughts, you're welcome to have some personal time. And I'd remind you that we have some chaplains who are available, and there may be others here who you may know at the meeting who can also support you. This business is brought by the Synod Standing Committee and it will be moved by Denise Leash and seconded by Mark Lawrence. And Jess Hately-Brown is going to speak to the report. So I'll hand over to Denise to introduce Jess, who's been the project officer of the Voluntary Assisted Dying Response Report. Thank you, Denise.
Moderator, members of Synod, I pay my respects to the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, the land on which I live and do a lot of my work as well. The Synod response to the Tasmanian End-of-Life Choices Voluntary Assisted Dying Act has been in a process now for quite some time. The report and proposal, I'm wondering if we could bring up the slides actually. I might keep on speaking anyway in the interest of time. Yeah? Okay. This report and the proposal come to Synod because the last Synod requested it. We might actually just go to the next slide. I'm the one that's got it. No, where do I have to point it? Aha, there we go. So the last Synod meeting requested it. That in the event that the legislation was passed in Tasmania, that the Standing Committee should initiate a process regarding the response of the Church in VicTas, ensuring really wide consultation. And I'm assuming you've had a chance to look at the report in relation to that. So presbyteries, in particular Tasmania, of course, Uniting Agewell, Pilgrim Theological College, Synod Ethics Committee, and to bring a report, and others, and to bring a report and proposal to this Synod meeting. So on the 22nd of April last year, the Tasmanian Parliament did pass the legislation making VAD, or voluntary assisted dying, legal in Tasmania, and so the Synod Standing Committee instituted a process to follow the 2021 Synod's resolutions. And Dr. Jessica Hately-Brown, who is going to be speaking to us in a moment, Director at the Centre for Evidence and Implementation, was engaged to lead this broad, wide consultation process and project over the last more than 12 months. So the Synod discerns and decides, and the purpose of this consultation process, the report and the proposals, is to resource us, the Synod, in our discernment and decisions. So a reference group met monthly to guide the work. Progress reports were brought regularly to the Standing Committee. Standing Committee endorsed the final report and proposals, and this means that they decided that the report provided the right kind of background and covered the sorts of areas the Synod would most want and need to enable them to be in a position, us to be in a position, to make their own discernment in relation to these matters. So while the legislation was passed in April last year, it'll first be implemented in October this year, making the Church's response at this Synod meeting timely and important. And to take you through some more of what you are able to read in the report and the decisions that we are going to be looking at, our discerning and deciding together, I'm going to pass over to Dr. Jess Hately-Brown to take us through the report in a bit more detail. Thank you.
Moderator, members of Synod, I thank Denise for the introduction. My name is Jessica Hately-Brown. I'm from Port Phillip West Presbytery and I live on Wurundjeri land. In relation to the proposals brought to us about the Tasmanian voluntary assisted dying legislation, the key questions before this Synod are: what will the nature of the Synod's response to this legislation be? And specifically, will it be permissible for the UCA agencies in Tasmania, Uniting Agewell, to make it allowable to access, support voluntary assisted dying according to the law in the context of their facilities and services in Tasmania? And also, how will the Church in Tasmania respond pastorally to individuals who are exploring or accessing voluntary assisted dying in accordance with the law, and also their family and loved ones? This is not necessarily a brand new topic for this Synod. In 1995, the then Synod of Victoria considered euthanasia, a slightly different concept and topic to voluntary assisted dying, and for more detail on that you can refer to the glossary in the report. In 1995, the Synod determined that they were not yet ready to make a definitive statement on this issue. In 2016, the then Presbytery of Tasmania made a submission to the Tasmanian government as part of the consultation for the Dying with Dignity Bill, which didn't pass, stating that the Uniting Church was neither for nor against the Dying with Dignity Bill. And then in 2019, some of you may have been members of Synod in 2019, where the Synod of Victoria and Tasmania passed a resolution that acknowledged there are a range of faithful Christian responses to the Victorian Voluntary Assisted Dying Act. And this resolution gave permission to the UCA institutions and a UCA-affiliated hospital group in Victoria to make voluntary assisted dying allowable. It's important for us to note here today that that resolution passed in 2019 related to Victoria only. At the time, the legislation had been passed and was just in the early days of being implemented in Victoria. Tasmania did not yet have comparable legislation or any legislation around voluntary assisted dying. And so as a synod, we passed a resolution in response to the Victorian legislation, acknowledging the possibility that we may well need to discern how to respond to a future piece of legislation coming out of Tasmania, should that happen down the track. And indeed it has. And that's why we are discerning this together today, taking into account some of the specifics of the Tasmanian legislation, in particular how it differs from the Victorian legislation, to discern a way forward as one synod. So the consultation and review process that the Standing Committee engaged me to lead had a really clear purpose, and that was to provide information about the voluntary assisted dying legislation in Tasmania, including some exploration of the similarities and differences compared to the Victorian legislation. And also to provide summaries of the views and perspectives heard during consultation with the councils of the church, committees of the church, and the agencies. We also sought to provide reflections on the theological, pastoral, policy and practice implications for the Synod and the relevant institutions, including exploration of the Victorian experience to date. And all of this for the purpose of resourcing this Synod's discussions, discernment and decision-making on this issue. The process constituted a range of activities, which I'll just outline briefly, hopefully by way of reminder if you've been able to read the report. We conducted research into the Tasmanian legislation and the Victorian data around the Victorian experience to date. We engaged in consultation with the Presbytery of Tasmania, Uniting VicTas, and Uniting Agewell staff, Equipping Leadership for Mission leadership team, and we collaborated with the Synod Legal Services and the Synod Ethics Committee, and also engaged in discussions with external stakeholders such as the Tasmanian Council of Churches. There's a couple of things I want to note here. We also invited Victorian presbyteries to take part in the consultation. Several explicitly declined on the basis that they had participated actively in the consultation process that had happened back in 2018 and 19, leading up to the 2019 Synod in relation to the Victorian legislation, and they did not perceive the need to do that work again. And we didn't proceed with consultations with other presbyteries on the basis that they didn't indicate back that that was a priority for them to be working through. We also sought consultation with the Uniting Aboriginal and Islander Christian Congress TAS Regional Committee through conversation with a key leader in that space, and also the Synod Intercultural Forum Steering Committee, again through liaison with key leader in that space. But those consultations didn't eventuate due to competing priorities, not least of which, I must add, managing some COVID crises at the time. So I just want to highlight a couple of key insights that we heard from some of the consultations to help resource you as you go into working groups to hear what's been said in other spaces in this conversation so far. In the Presbytery of Tasmania, I gave a presentation there, and then we had some question and answer, and the Presbytery engaged in some detailed and thoughtful working group work, table group work. And they engaged in really careful listening, discussion and discernment, and then reported back to a plenary, and also filled in a worksheet that was collected. And a key insight I want to share from that consultation is that all table groups who participated were warm to voluntary assisted dying being allowable within the context of Tasmanian agency facilities and services. There was also a clear emphasis in this consultation on the importance of providing pastoral care regardless of end-of-life choices. Uniting Agewell reconfirmed their position that they offered as part of the 2018-2019 consultation that we did for the Victorian legislation. And this position is that Uniting Agewell supports facilitating a resident's or a client's end-of-life choices, including voluntary assisted dying in accordance with the law. They also reaffirmed that they believe palliative care is crucial and should be resourced accordingly. Uniting Agewell requests that this synod provide clear direction, that a decision is made at this synod meeting to give them a policy and practice direction in how to respond to the legislation when it comes into effect in October. And they also confirmed that they, in accordance with what would be required in the legislation, that it is important to provide the opportunity for staff to conscientiously object to participating in the process without any penalty. Uniting VicTas also reconfirmed a position that we have heard from them before in 2018-2019. Uniting VicTas indicated that they believe voluntary assisted dying should be allowable in their context in accordance with the law, as they have a strong focus on consumer rights and choice. They emphasise that it's desirable to have a consistent position and approach between the states, and that they already have in place training and policies and procedures for staff in Victoria that have really been put to the test already, and these can be tailored for the Tasmanian context. And that's true of Uniting Agewell as well. Uniting also indicated that they haven't received any negative feedback or objections to their position in Victoria, and Uniting's position statement is included as an appendix to the report if you're interested in more detail. And finally, the ELM Leadership Team Consultation Key Insights. This team emphasised that their observation was that the Victorian and Tasmanian legislations were similar and thus have comparable theological and pastoral implications. And therefore, the theological work done in 2018 and 2019, when we were discerning how to respond to the Victorian legislation, remains a helpful resource. The pastoral resources compiled on the Synod website, which are available to all of us now, are appropriate for both the Victorian and the Tasmanian contexts. So I want to say a brief note on the proposals. So the proposal has several clauses, and these clauses have ended up mirroring the 2019 Synod resolutions for how to respond to the Victorian voluntary assisted dying legislation, even though I must emphasise we did not take that as a foregone conclusion. The whole reason we engaged in this consultation and review process is because we were open to hearing the voice of how to respond to this particular legislation. But our consultation and review process pointed us unmistakably in the same direction. Clause A of the proposals provides a theological frame, whereas Clause B affirms the Synod's position that palliative care is primary. Clause C affirms a position that there is a range of faithful Christian responses to voluntary assisted dying, specifically the Tasmanian voluntary assisted dying legislation. And Clause D gives permission to the agencies for voluntary assisted dying to be allowable in their context in accordance with the law in the Tasmanian context. Clause E acknowledges that there is some existing institutional preparedness at Uniting VicTas and Uniting Agewell to respond to the introduction of voluntary assisted dying in Tasmania. And Clause F is the Synod requesting those agencies to do any further work that would be necessary to tailor their policies, procedures, staff training and staff support processes to make it consistent with what would be needed for the Tasmanian legislation. And Clause G indicates the primacy of a compassionate pastoral response to all individuals and families who might be considering engaging with, having conversations about voluntary assisted dying. So with that, moderator, thank you. I'll leave it there.
Thank you. We'll take a few moments for questions of clarification. We're not going to enter into the substance of the conversation at this point, but if there are questions of clarification, anything you don't understand in the way that this has been put, I invite those questions now. In that case, I think we might move to inviting Ian Ferguson, the convener of the facilitation group, to come forward and tell us how the working group process is going to work, because this is something we're going to spend time on in working groups together.
Moderator Ian Ferguson from the Presbytery of Port Phillip West. I'm the convener of the facilitation team and I live and worship on Wurundjeri Woiwurrung country. Welcome Synod members to the first of two working groups that you'll be participating in during this Synod. The second working group will happen after lunch tomorrow, and this first working group obviously will be focusing on the Tasmanian VAD proposals. Working groups are an important way to listen together to the guidance of the Holy Spirit, a process by which every voice in the room can be heard in the shaping of our decisions on this really significant issue. Working groups are not decision-making bodies. You will be asked in your working group to express warmth or coolness towards the proposal. Each group will be asked to gauge the level of consensus, but you're not tied to your view expressed there. Your group, because the decisions will come back to the floor of Synod here tomorrow. Your group will be asked to give specific feedback to the facilitation team about each of the clauses of the proposal that Jess just talked us through in outline. You'll be asked what level of consensus there is in the group for each clause, what changes would help you or others in the group be more comfortable with each clause, and what further information is needed to inform decisions. And I want to stress the importance and helpfulness of suggesting alternative wording for parts of the proposal that aren't working for you. It really helps the facilitation team in its work to be given suggestions. Whether or not your wording ends up in the final proposal, it will inevitably feed into the process. So I really encourage, if there's issues, if something's not working, how could we change it? What could we suggest that might help move the Synod towards decision? Sue in a moment will explain how you're going to get into your groups and find where your group is meeting. But the 7 clauses to work through in the proposal in an hour. That's quite a lot of material to get through, so you'll need to keep moving and focus in on the things that are problematic perhaps, or that you want to give specific feedback on. Your the scribe from each group, will enter your feedback into SurveyMonkey, and then the facilitation team will analyse it and bring a summary report back to the Synod together with any suggested changes to the proposal to help the Synod move to a decision tomorrow. So once again, it's important that your scribe knows what suggestions you're making, so that we at the facilitation group hear it. So I think that's enough from me. Let's put the time into the groups, moderator.
Thank you, Ian. I'll ask Sue to make, it says business convener, can you, we're running a bit early, and so that means we've got some extra time in those working groups. So Sue, do you want to say how we might use that?
Thank you, moderator. It would be good in your working groups. We're aware that not everyone got to working groups online at the orientation. We probably had half the members present at that. So given we've got a few extra minutes in working groups, we encourage you to spend some time in community building and getting to know each other before you start this important discussion. Finding your working group is a bit like finding groups at school camp. So your working group letter is on your name tag, if you haven't found that already. And when we say go and not before, if the working group leaders could come down the front and find their corresponding letter, which is in alphabetical order, and then fan out through the room whilst holding their letter up high, which we know is tricky because it's on a piece of paper, then you can look at your tag and find your corresponding letter, and then your working group leader has been told where your group will be meeting and will be able to usher you off to that space. Has everyone got that? Excellent. So go. Enjoy your working groups. Working group leaders, come.
Hang on.
Sorry.
I know you said the word go.
I take it back. Moderator, back to you.
Thank you. But if we're going to have everyone move at once, you're going to have trouble finding each other. Could the working group leaders go? Everyone else stay put for a moment.
And I should have said, we go straight to dinner from working groups and we meet back here at 7:30 after dinner.
So, watch what's happening, see who's got your letter, and once they've all got their letters, I'll say that magic word again and everyone else can move. All right, go.